She married a penniless stranger, then learned his name ruled the territory. The day Mercy Vale found the stranger beside her north fence, the wind was dragging dust across the wheat stubble like it meant to bury every lonely thing still standing. He was folded against a cedar post with one hand pressed to the rough wood, as if the fence itself was the only reason he had not fallen flat into the dirt. His hat was gone. His coat was torn at the shoulder. His boots were caked with road dust clear up to the ankle, and his face had the pale, hollow look of a man who had walked too far with nothing left inside him but stubbornness. Mercy stopped with the water pail in her hand. For a moment, she thought he might be dead. Then his head lifted. His eyes found hers across the fence line. They were gray, tired, and ashamed to be needing anything. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dry as creek stone, "I don't mean harm." Mercy did not move closer right away. A woman alone on the frontier learned kindness from her heart, but caution from the world. She stood on her father's land, with her father's old shotgun inside the kitchen door, and her father's debts folded in a tin box beneath the bed. She had buried him 2 winters ago behind the little church in Dry Creek Crossing, and since then every fence rail, every sack of flour, every acre of wheat had been her burden to carry. She was 27, unmarried, and town tongues had long since decided what kind of woman she must be. Too proud, too plain, too stubborn, too lonely. Mercy had learned to let them talk. Gossip did not mend roofs. It did not chop wood. It did not keep bankers from riding out with polite smiles and cruel papers. So she worked from before sunup until lamplight and told herself loneliness was just another chore. But the man by her fence looked at her as if even asking for water cost him pride. "What happened to you?" she asked. He swallowed. His gaze flickered toward the road behind him, then back to her. "Lost my way." "That is not an answer." "No, ma'am." A faint breath moved through him, not quite a laugh, "but it is the one I have strength for." Mercy studied him. There was no pistol at his hip that she could see, no horse nearby, no bedroll, no pack. Nothing but the clothes on him and a small leather satchel hanging from one shoulder, thin enough to hold only papers or a shirt if that. "What is your name?" The question seemed to strike him harder than it should have. His eyes lowered. 1 second passed, then another. "Daniel," he said. Mercy waited. He gave her nothing more. "Daniel what?" His jaw tightened, and for a strange moment Mercy had the feeling that a door had closed somewhere inside him. Not loudly, not rudely, just shut. Just Daniel for now. Mercy should have turned away then. Every sensible voice in Dry Creek Crossing would have told her so. Mrs. Elspeth Crowley would have crossed herself and said no decent woman took in a nameless man. Banker Tuttle would have smiled behind his spectacles and counted another weakness in her. Reverend Pike would have lowered his voice and spoken kindly of reputation, which was often the same as speaking cruelly of survival. But Mercy had watched too many people pass her farm without stopping when her wagon wheel broke, when her roof split, when her father's coffin had to be carried from the house. She knew what it was to need help and receive only distance. So she set the pail down, climbed through the fence gap, and held the dipper to him. Daniel's hand trembled when he took it. He drank slowly at first, then with the hunger of a man who had been dreaming of water. When he handed the dipper back, his fingers brushed hers, cold despite the sun. "Thank you," he said, 2 words, quiet ones. But they were spoken as if he meant to repay them for the rest of his life. Mercy looked toward the farmhouse behind her. It sat low and weather-worn against the land, with one shutter hanging crooked and a porch step that groaned under every boot. The barn leaned slightly east like it was tired too. Her father had named the place Willow Bend Farm because of the 3 willow trees near the creek. 2 had died. The last one still stood, thin and silver-leaved, refusing to give in. "You can rest in the barn," she said, "for 1 night." Daniel looked up quickly. "I can work for it." "You can hardly stand." "I can still work." There was something in the answer that made Mercy pause, not pride alone, fear, as if charity without labor was dangerous to him. As if being helpless had already stripped him of too much. "Tomorrow then," she said. "If you are able." He nodded, but when he tried to rise, his knees betrayed him. Mercy caught his arm before he could fall. He was heavier than she expected, all lean muscle beneath dust and torn cloth. He stiffened at her touch, not like a man offended, but like one unaccustomed to being held up by anyone. "You are safe for now," she said, surprising herself with the softness of it. Daniel turned his face toward her. For the first time, she saw more than exhaustion in him. She saw grief tucked deep behind his eyes, and a secret sitting there like a stone. Safe. The word seemed to pain him. Mercy helped him through the fence gap and across the yard toward the barn. Her old mule, Juniper, watched them with solemn judgment from the corral. A red hen scattered out of their path. The wind moved through the dry grass, whispering against the house, the barn, the empty places where Mercy's father's voice no longer lived. At the barn door, Daniel stopped. "I do not have money," he said. Mercy glanced at him. "I did not ask." "I may not be able to leave soon." "I did not ask that either." He looked down and shame colored his dust-covered face. "Then why help me?" Mercy did not have a ready answer. Maybe because the world had become meaner than it needed to be. Maybe because she was tired of living alone with only unpaid bills and town whispers for company. Maybe because his silence had not felt empty, but wounded. Or maybe because somewhere inside her, against all sense, she had already trusted the sorrow in him. She opened the barn door. "Because a man should not be left to die beside a fence," she said. Daniel stepped into the dim gold light of the barn, where hay dust floated like tiny sparks. He turned back once, and Mercy felt the weight of his gaze settle on her with a strange, quiet force. "Mercy," he said, reading her name from the carved board above the tack wall, where her father had once marked the farm accounts. "That is your name." "It is." His expression changed just a little. "Fitting," he murmured. She almost asked what he meant, but something held her back. Instead, she fetched a blanket from the house, along with bread, beans, and a clean cloth. When she returned, Daniel was sitting on a hay bale with his head bowed and his satchel held tightly in both hands. Not like a poor man guarding his last possession. Like a man guarding a life he had no right to bring into her barn. Mercy noticed, but said nothing. That night, after the chores were done and the lamp burned low, she stood at her kitchen window and looked toward the dark shape of the barn. The stranger slept beneath her roof, if a barn roof counted. The town would skin her name raw if it learned of him. Yet Mercy could not shake the feeling that Daniel had not only stumbled onto her land. He had been running from something. And whatever it was, it had followed him straight to her fence. By sunrise, Mercy had already regretted half her kindness and defended the other half in her own mind. She carried coffee to the barn in a chipped blue cup, telling herself it was only decent. A man who had slept on hay after near collapsing by a fence ought to have something warm in his stomach. Still, as she crossed the yard, she kept her father's old work knife tucked in the pocket of her apron, not because she believed Daniel meant harm, but because belief was not the same as wisdom. The barn door stood open. Mercy stopped. Daniel was not asleep where she had left him. The blanket was folded with careful corners atop the hay bale, and the tin plate from supper had been washed clean at the pump and set upside down on a barrel. For one sharp second, Mercy thought he had taken the little food she had given him and slipped away into the morning. Then she heard hammering. She turned toward the west side of the barn. Daniel stood on a short ladder, one boot braced against a rung, working a loose plank back into place where last winter's wind had worried it free. His coat was off, his shirt sleeves rolled to the forearm. He still looked pale, and every few moments he paused as if steadying himself against a wave of weakness, but the hammer moved true in his hand. Mercy felt irritation rise before gratitude could. "You were told to rest," she called. Daniel looked over his shoulder. Sunlight cut across his face, showing the bruise of exhaustion under his eyes. "You said I could work tomorrow if I was able." "You are not able." That plank disagreed. She should not have smiled. She nearly did anyway. Instead, she walked closer and held out the coffee. Come down before you fall and give the town something worse to talk about than it already has. He climbed down slowly, accepting the cup with both hands. Town knows already. Not yet. Mercy looked toward the road that ran past her property, pale and dusty beneath the morning light. But the town has eyes. Most of them belong to Mrs. Elspeth Crowley, and she can spot trouble before the trouble knows its own name. Daniel's expression tightened at the word name. It was only a flicker, but Mercy caught it. She said nothing. Not yet. He drank the coffee, then looked toward the split rail fence beyond the yard. Your north line is sagging. My north line has been sagging since spring. Cattle will find it. I do not have cattle. Other folks do. Mercy folded her arms. You have opinions for a man with no last name. Daniel lowered the cup. For a moment the easy rhythm between them vanished. He looked down into the coffee as if his answer might be floating there. I had one, he said quietly. Mercy waited, but he did not go on. That should have frightened her more. Perhaps it did. Yet there was no swagger in him, no slyness, no hard glint of a man weaving lies for sport. He looked like someone who had been carrying a truth so long it had become a weight he feared setting down. Mercy took the empty cup from him. Then keep your secrets, Daniel. But do not mistake my kindness for blindness. His eyes lifted to hers. Something like respect moved through them. No, ma'am, he said, I would not. She set him to smaller work after that, though he argued without raising his voice. He split kindling by the wash shed, patched the chicken gate, and carried 2 buckets from the creek after Mercy told him one would do. By noon, sweat had darkened his shirt and color had returned faintly to his face. Mercy watched him from the kitchen window while kneading dough. He worked like a man who knew labor, not one pretending at it. He did not ask where tools were more than once. He noticed what needed doing. He spoke gently to Juniper when the old mule refused to move from the shade. He gave the hens a wide path as if even birds had a right to peace. A man could fake manners. Mercy knew that, but it was harder to fake patience when no one was praising it. Near mid-afternoon, a wagon creaked up the road and slowed at her gate. Mercy saw the bonnet first and shut her eyes for half a breath. Mrs. Elspeth Crowley. The widow Crowley had a face sharp enough to cut pie crust and a heart that might have been tender once, before years of burying 2 husbands and minding everyone else's affairs had dried it around the edges. She climbed down from the wagon holding a basket covered with cloth, though Mercy knew at once the basket was not the reason she had come. Her eyes had already found Daniel by the woodpile. Well, Mrs. Crowley said, drawing the word out like thread. I was passing by. Mercy wiped flour from her hands onto her apron. You live 4 miles east. And yet here I am. Mrs. Crowley leaned slightly, trying to see around Mercy. I heard from Orrin Pike's boy that smoke rose from your chimney near midnight. Thought maybe you were ill. I was not. And your hired man. Mercy kept her face still. I do not have a hired man. Daniel set the axe down carefully and turned. He did not come closer. He only removed his hat, though it was not his, but one of Mercy's father's old straw hats, too wide in the brim and worn pale by weather. Afternoon, ma'am, he said. Mrs. Crowley's brows lifted. Mercy Vale, there is a strange man chopping wood in your yard. So there is. Does he have kin? Not here. Money? Not that he has shown me. A destination. Mercy felt Daniel's silence behind her like a held breath. She lifted her chin. He needed water and rest. I gave both. If charity has become a crime in Dry Creek Crossing, Reverend Pike ought to preach on it Sunday. Mrs. Crowley's mouth tightened, but her eyes softened for the briefest moment. Charity is one thing. A woman alone is another. Folks will talk. Folks were talking before he came. That does not mean you hand them kindling. The words stung because they were true. Daniel stepped forward then, his expression troubled. I can leave, Miss Vale. Mercy turned on him more sharply than she meant to. You can stand there and be quiet. He obeyed, though something in his eyes dimmed. Mrs. Crowley watched that exchange with great interest, too much interest. Then she handed Mercy the basket. "Biscuits," she said, "since I already came all this way by accident." "Thank you." Mrs. Crowley climbed back into her wagon, but before she flicked the reins, she looked at Daniel again. A man without a past is either hiding from shame or running toward it. Daniel did not answer. After she left, the yard felt too quiet. Mercy carried the basket inside, and Daniel followed only as far as the porch steps. He stood below them like a man unsure whether he was allowed nearer. "She is right," he said. Mercy looked back at him. "About folks talking. About me being kindling." The weariness in his voice was not from work now. It came from someplace deeper. Mercy should have agreed. It would have been safer, cleaner. She should have told him to take bread, take water, and move on before the whole town turned his presence into a stain she could not wash off. Instead, she remembered his trembling hand around the dipper, his folded blanket, the washed plate, the way he had said he once had a last name. "You can sleep in the barn again tonight," she said. Daniel looked at her as if she had handed him more than shelter. "Miss Vale." "One more night," she warned. But as evening fell over Willow Bend Farm and the first stars rose above the broken roofline, Mercy knew one night had already become something more dangerous. It had become a choice. And somewhere in the dark of the barn, Daniel sat awake with his satchel in his hands, staring at the road as if he feared the past might ride in before morning. By the end of the week, Daniel had become a shape the farm expected. Mercy did not like admitting that, even to herself. Yet when she stepped onto the porch each morning, she had begun to look first toward the barn, then toward the woodpile, then toward the north fence, measuring the day by where his quiet labor had carried him. He never waited to be told twice. He rose before the sun, washed at the pump, and took to the chores as if Willow Bend Farm had once been his responsibility, and he was only remembering how to care for it. The sagging north fence stood straight again by Tuesday. By Wednesday, the chicken gate no longer swung crooked. By Thursday, he had cleared the ditch near the lower field so the creek water would run clean instead of pooling where mosquitoes gathered. On Friday, Mercy found him on the roof. Her heart leapt so hard it turned to anger before fear could show. "Daniel." He looked down from the low slope, hammer in hand. "Morning. Do not morning me from my roof." A faint smile touched his mouth. It was the first smile she had seen from him, small and tired, but real enough to change his face. "It leaks above the pantry." "I know where it leaks." "I figured you did. There was a flour sack under it." "That does not mean I invited a half-starved man to climb up there and break his neck. I am less half-starved than I was." Mercy stood in the yard with both hands on her hips. The old roof shingles were silvered and curled, and the man above them looked too steady for someone who had nearly collapsed 6 days ago. It bothered her that he moved with such easy balance. It bothered her more that she trusted him not to fall. "Come down for breakfast," she said. "I have 2 boards left." "Now." The word cracked across the yard. Daniel paused. Then, without argument, he tucked the hammer into his belt and climbed down the ladder. That was another thing Mercy had noticed about him. He did not answer harshness with harshness. He received it, weighed it, and let it pass unless dignity required a reply. It made her feel ashamed sometimes, though he never asked her to. Inside the kitchen, breakfast waited simple and hot, corn cakes, beans, and coffee. Daniel stood by the door until she pointed at the chair across from her. "You have eaten at this table 3 mornings now," she said. "It will not bite you today." He sat carefully. "I do not want to get used to what is not mine." Mercy poured coffee. "Most men get used to what is not theirs quick enough." "I am not most men." "No," she said before she could stop herself. "I suppose you are not." A quiet fell between them, not empty but close. Daniel looked at the table, at the scrape marks her father's knife had left years ago, at the little crack near the corner where Mercy had once dropped a skillet. He studied ordinary things as if they were precious. "Your father built this house?" he asked. with 2 brothers and more hope than money. He must have been proud of it. He was proud of the land. Mercy rubbed her thumb along the handle of her cup. The house he mostly argued with. Daniel smiled again, and this time Mercy did not look away fast enough. He left you all this? He asked. The land, the house, the barn, the debt, and a reputation for being difficult. Were you difficult before, or did the debt improve you? The laugh escaped her before she could catch it. It startled both of them. Mercy pressed her lips together, but it was too late. Daniel had heard it, and something warm moved through his eyes. Not triumph, not flirtation. Relief, maybe. As if her laughter had opened a window in a room he had thought locked. She stood quickly to fetch more coffee. Do not grow proud. It was not that funny. No, ma'am. But he was still smiling. Later that morning, Mercy hitched Juniper to the wagon and drove into Dry Creek Crossing for flour, lamp oil, and nails. Daniel offered to go in her place. She refused before he finished the sentence. The town already had enough to chew on without sending a nameless man to buy her supplies. Dry Creek Crossing sat in a shallow bend between the creek and the stage road, no more than a church, a bank, a mercantile, a livery, and a row of false front buildings that looked braver from a distance. Mercy felt eyes on her the moment the wagon rolled in. Inside Gable's mercantile, talk dropped half a breath too late. Mrs. Crowley stood by the calico bolts. Reverend Pike examined a jar of peppermint sticks with too much attention. Banker Amos Tuttle smiled from near the stove, polished and narrow as a letter opener. Miss Vale, he said, heard you hired help. I bought nails, Mercy replied. His smile did not change. Nails are useful, so are good choices. Mrs. Crowley gave him a sharp look. For all her meddling, she did not like men speaking sweetly with poison underneath. Mr. Gable cleared his throat and began weighing flour. How is the west roof holding? Better by the hour, Mercy said. So it is true, Tuttle said. The stranger is still there. Mercy turned to him then. A man needed help, I gave it. In your barn. That is where hay is. A small sound came from Mrs. Crowley that might have been a cough or might have been approval. Tuttle stepped closer, lowering his voice though everyone could hear. Mercy, your father owed this bank money. I have been patient out of respect for him, but patience is not blindness. The town worries for you. The town has never paid one note on my behalf. No, but reputation carries value. Mercy lifted the sack of flour into her arms before Mr. Gable could help. Then I hope mine is worth enough to settle the debt. Her arms ached by the time she reached the wagon, but she did not let anyone see it. On the ride home, anger kept her spine straight. Only when Willow Bend came into view did her breath loosen. The roof caught the afternoon light. The north fence stood mended. Smoke lifted from the chimney in a thin, steady line. Daniel was splitting wood when she arrived. He stopped at once and came to unload the wagon. How bad? He asked. Mercy looked at him sharply. What makes you think it was bad? You are holding yourself like someone insulted you and lived. That almost made her laugh again. Almost. Banker Tuttle thinks reputation carries value. Daniel's face changed. It was subtle, but Mercy saw it. A shadow crossed his expression, dark and quick. Does he trouble you often? He holds my father's note. How much? Mercy stiffened. That is not your concern. No, he said quietly. I suppose not. But something in his eyes had gone distant, calculating in a way she had not seen before. Not greedy, not fearful either. For one strange instant, Daniel looked less like a penniless drifter and more like a man accustomed to weighing problems larger than a farm debt. Then the look vanished. He lifted the nail keg from the wagon. Where do you want this? By the barn. He carried it off, but Mercy stood a moment longer beside Juniper, watching him. Her heart had begun asking questions her sense could not answer. Who was this man who knew work, manners, silence, and sorrow? What kind of poor stranger looked at debt as if it were not a mountain, but a door he might open if only he had the right key? That evening, they worked together until the sky turned copper. Daniel held boards in place while Mercy hammered. Mercy steadied the ladder, while Daniel patched the last weak seam above the pantry. Neither spoke much, but their silence had changed. It no longer felt like distance. It felt like two people listening for the same thing. When the first cool drops of rain began after supper, Mercy stood in the pantry and looked up. No leak. For the first time in months, water did not fall into the flour sack. Daniel stood in the doorway, careful not to cross in without invitation. "I hope it holds." Mercy touched the dry shelf. "It will." Something tender passed between them then, quiet as rain. If you believe love should be built through truth, patience, and small acts of care, stay with this story as Mercy learns who the stranger in her barn truly is. Daniel lowered his eyes first. "I should tell you something someday." Mercy turned toward him. "Someday is a dangerous word," she said. "I know." Outside, rain washed the dust from the yard and darkened the road beyond the fence. And in the barn loft that night, Daniel opened his leather satchel beneath a lantern's low glow, drew out a folded paper sealed with dark red wax, and stared at the name written there as if it belonged to a dead man. The rain lasted 2 days, and for the first time since her father died, Mercy did not wake to the sound of water dripping into a pan. She lay still in the dark on the second morning, listening. Not to the leak, because there was none. Not to the wind worrying the loose shutter, because Daniel had fixed that too. She listened instead to the strange quiet of a house that had been repaired by hands that did not belong to her or to memory. It should have comforted her. Instead, it frightened her. A woman who had carried every burden alone learned to mistrust relief. Relief could make a person soft. It could make a body lean toward help before asking what price would be charged later. Mercy had seen enough men in Dry Creek Crossing offer kindness with hooks buried underneath it. Yet Daniel never named a price. He slept in the barn. He worked until she ordered him to stop. He ate what she set before him and thanked her every time. He never stepped into the house without being invited. He never asked about money again after the day she told him her debt was none of his concern, and somehow that made him harder to understand. By the time the rain cleared, the town had decided it understood him well enough. Mercy learned it on Sunday. She almost stayed home from church. The sky was still low and silver, and the road to Dry Creek Crossing had turned soft in the ruts. But staying home would only feed the talk, and Mercy Vale had never handed gossip a plate if she could help it. So she hitched Juniper, put on her brown church dress, pinned her hair smooth, and drove herself into town with her chin lifted. Daniel did not come. He had offered to remain behind before she could even ask. "It would be better," he said, standing near the wagon with his hat in both hands. "Better for whom?" Mercy asked. "For you." That answer had irritated her because it was likely true. Now, sitting alone in the third pew while whispers moved like mice behind her, Mercy wished she had told him to come anyway. At least then the town would have had a living man to stare at instead of making a feast of his shadow. Reverend Pike preached from the book of Ruth, speaking of loyalty, kindness, and the courage to stand beside another soul in uncertain fields. It might have been chance. It might have been the Reverend's gentle way of scolding half the congregation without naming names. Either way, Mercy felt every word settle on her shoulders. After service, Mrs. Crowley caught her by the church steps. "You look tired," the widow said. "I look the same as always." "No, you look like a woman pretending not to hear what everyone is saying." Mercy glanced past her. Banker Tuttle stood beneath the elm with 2 ranchers and the blacksmith's wife, his mouth moving in low confidence. When he noticed Mercy looking, he tipped his hat with a smile too smooth to be polite. "What are they saying?" Mercy asked, though she knew enough of it already. Mrs. Crowley pursed her lips. "That the stranger has been on your land near 2 weeks, that he has no people claiming him, that no one saw him arrive, that a woman with debt may be tempted to take help where she should not." Mercy's face burned, but her voice stayed even. "Anything else?" "That if your father were living, he would not allow it." The word struck deeper than all the rest. Mercy looked toward the cemetery beyond the churchyard fence, where the white cross over her father's grave leaned slightly from last winter's frost. She could almost hear his voice, not angry, not ashamed, but tired with concern. She wondered what he would think of Daniel in the barn. She wondered if he would see danger where she saw dignity. "I have done nothing wrong," she said. Mrs. Crowley's expression softened. "I know that, but reputation is not built only from truth. It is built from what idle mouths can make others believe." Before Mercy could answer, Reverend Pike approached with his Bible tucked under one arm. He was a kind man with a lined face and cautious eyes, the sort who hated hurting anyone but would do it gently if he thought heaven required it. "Miss Vale," he said, "may I speak with you?" Mrs. Crowley looked as if she intended to stay, then thought better of it and moved away slowly enough to hear if either of them spoke loudly. Reverend Pike lowered his voice. "I know your heart. Your father raised you to be charitable. My father also raised me to stand straight when people bent the truth. Yes," he glanced toward the others near the elm, "but the world is not always fair in what it believes. This arrangement with the man on your farm cannot continue as it is." Mercy's fingers tightened around her gloves. "He has nowhere to go." "Then he must find work elsewhere, or respectable lodging or kin." "He has no kin here." "Then," the Reverend said carefully, "there is another path if both of you are willing." Mercy stared at him. The meaning came before the words did, and with it came such a rush of shock that she almost laughed. "Marriage," she said. Reverend Pike looked pained. "A practical marriage has protected more than one frontier woman from ruinous talk. I do not speak of romance. I speak of safety, reputation, and survival. Survival seems to ask strange things of women." "It does," he said quietly, "too often." That honesty cooled her anger but not her pride. Mercy left the church with the word marriage beating inside her like a second heart. She drove home through drying mud, past brown fields and cottonwoods shining with rain, telling herself the notion was foolish. Daniel was a stranger, a kind stranger, yes, a hardworking stranger, a man with gray eyes and quiet hands and sorrow hidden under every answer, but still a stranger. At Willow Bend, she found him at the creek, stacking stones along the washout where the rain had torn the bank loose. He looked up as the wagon rolled in. One glance at her face made him set down the stone. "What happened?" Mercy climbed down. "The town has married us already in every way except the legal one." His face went still. She gave a humorless laugh. "Do not look so terrified. I have not agreed to anything." Daniel wiped his hands on his trousers. "Who suggested it?" Reverend Pike, kindly, which somehow made it worse. Daniel looked toward the road. "I should leave." The speed of the answer hurt her, though she did not know why. "So that is your solution to everything?" she asked. A hard question rises, and Daniel with no last name takes to the road. He flinched. Mercy regretted it at once, but the words had already left her. "I would not have your name dragged low because of me," he said. "My name was being dragged before you had breath enough to say yours. That does not mean I should add weight." "And where would you go?" He did not answer. The empty space after the question was answer enough. Mercy looked at the land around them, the mended fence, the patched roof, the creek stones placed to hold back the next storm. His labor was everywhere now, woven into the farm like thread pulled through cloth. Sending him away might save her reputation, or it might simply leave her alone again with work too heavy and a town still hungry for talk. Daniel spoke first. "I have nothing fit to offer a wife." Mercy turned back to him. "I did not ask for an offer. No land, no money, no family I can give you. Not even a proper name." There it was again, that locked door. Mercy's heart moved toward it, then stopped. "Would you be cruel to me?" she asked, his eyes sharpened with hurt. "No." "Would you take my land?" "No." "Would you shame me on purpose?" "Never." "Would you work?" "As long as my hands can hold tools." Would you leave when hardship comes? Daniel looked at her then, and the air between them changed. No, he said, not if you ask me to stay. Mercy's throat tightened. That was the answer she had feared most, because some quiet part of her had wanted it. She looked away toward the last willow by the creek, its thin leaves flashing silver in the pale sun. I am not foolish, Daniel. I know this would be practical. Reputation, survival, shared work. A roof that does not leak, and a field that might be saved before winter. I know that. Yes, ma'am. But I will not marry a man out of pity, and I will not be pitied in return. I do not pity you. His voice was low and certain. Mercy looked back. Daniel stepped closer, but not too close. I admire you, more than I have any right to say. You stand on land that has tried to break you, in a town that underestimates you, under a debt that would bend most men double. And still, you gave water to a stranger at your fence. The praise landed where she had no armor. Mercy hated that her eyes stung. You speak too fine for a poor man, she whispered. Sadness passed over his face. Maybe I was not always poor in the ways that mattered. She did not know what to do with that. She only knew the sun was dropping, the road was drying, and the world would not stop pressing simply because her heart needed more time. Reverend Pike will be at the church tomorrow afternoon, she said, if we choose it. Daniel went very still. Mercy. This would be a practical arrangement. If that is all you want it to be, then that is all I will ask of it. The gentleness of that promise nearly undid her. And if affection comes? She asked before courage failed. Daniel's eyes held hers, full of secrets, fear, and something painfully honest beneath both. Then I will count it as grace, he said. The next day, under a plain church roof with Mrs. Crowley watching through damp eyes she pretended were stern ones, Mercy Vale placed her hand in Daniel's and married a man who owned nothing but a borrowed hat, a hidden past, and the quiet power to make her feel less alone. And when Reverend Pike pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel looked at her with such sorrowful tenderness that Mercy wondered whether she had just saved him from ruin, or stepped unknowingly into the very secret that would break her heart. Marriage changed less than Mercy feared, and more than she was ready to admit. The morning after the church vows, she woke before dawn out of habit, expecting the same lonely hush that had greeted her for 2 years. Instead, she heard quiet movement in the kitchen. A chair leg touched the floor. The stove door creaked. A match scratched once, failed, then scratched again. Mercy sat up in bed, heart racing before memory returned. Daniel was in her house now, her husband. The word felt too large for the room. She dressed slowly, tying her hair back with fingers that did not quite obey her. The bedroom had belonged to her parents once, and Mercy had not asked Daniel to sleep there. She had made up a pallet in the small front room near the stove, telling him plainly that a church paper did not turn strangers into true companions overnight. Daniel had accepted it with a nod. I will take only what you offer, he had said. Now, when Mercy stepped into the kitchen, she found him kneeling by the stove with his shirt sleeves rolled and soot on one cheek. Coffee sat warming in the pot, and a skillet of cornmeal mush had been set too close to the fire. It may be ruined, he said without turning. Mercy looked into the skillet. It is not ruined, it is only frightened. He glanced back at her, and that same quiet smile appeared, the one that seemed to come unwillingly, as if joy still had to ask permission before crossing his face. I thought a husband ought to make breakfast on his first morning, he said. Did someone tell you that? No. Then where did you learn it? His hands paused. Mercy saw the question land, saw the familiar wall rise behind his eyes. She had not meant to press. Not so early. Not while their marriage still felt like a new pair of boots, stiff and uncertain. I suppose I wanted to, he said. It was not an answer, but it was gentle enough that Mercy let it pass. They ate at the table with the lamp between them, though dawn was already pale at the windows. Daniel bowed his head before eating, not in a showy way, only a brief quiet lowering of his eyes. Mercy watched him over her cup. She wondered if he had grown up in a house where prayers were said. She wondered if his mother lived. She wondered what sort of people produced a man who could mend a roof, speak carefully, read a debt notice upside down from across a table, and still flinch when asked for his last name. The debt notice lay near the sugar tin because Mercy had been too tired to hide it the night before. Daniel did not mention it. That restraint unsettled her more than curiosity would have. The first weeks of their marriage passed in work. They rose before the sun and walked the fields while the air still carried night's coolness. Mercy showed him where the lower wheat had thinned, where the soil broke too dry, where the creek sometimes overflowed and stole seed from the edge rows. Daniel listened as if every word mattered. He asked questions that were never foolish, and more than once Mercy caught herself answering as if he had been beside her for years. He fixed the loose hinge on the smokehouse door. He cleaned the old plow blade. He patched the corral rail where Juniper liked to lean her stubborn weight. When the handle of Mercy's best hoe split, Daniel carved a new one after supper, sitting on the porch step in the gold hour before evening, his knife moving slow and sure through the wood. Mercy sat nearby with mending in her lap. They did not need much talk. The quiet between them had become something with shape. It no longer pressed against Mercy's chest like loneliness. It rested there like a hand. One evening she pricked her finger with the needle and hissed softly. Daniel looked up at once. "You hurt." "It is a needle prick, not a bear attack." "Still hurt." Mercy almost gave a sharp answer, but his concern was so plain that it disarmed her. She held up her finger. A bead of blood shone at the tip. Daniel took the clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it without stepping closer than he ought. She accepted it. His initials were stitched in one corner. D.W. Mercy stared at them. Daniel saw her looking. The porch seemed to still around them. "W," she asked. He took a breath, and Mercy thought, this is it. This is the door opening, but his eyes lowered. "A name I am not ready to use." The hurt was small, but it was real. Not enough to break anything. Enough to remind her that even married, he remained partly hidden. Mercy wrapped the handkerchief around her finger. A wife should know her husband's name. "Yes," he said, "she should." The answer angered her because he did not defend himself from it. "Then, why does she not?" Daniel looked toward the fields, where dusk was gathering in the furrows. "Because her husband is afraid that name will change the way she sees him." Mercy's heart beat once hard. "Is it a criminal name?" "No. A married name, already belonging to another woman." His head turned sharply. "No, never." The force of it steadied her more than she expected. "Then I do not understand." "I know." He sounded so tired that her anger lost its edge. Still, she would not soften too quickly. Mercy Vale had not survived by pretending thorns were flowers. "You cannot ask trust from me while keeping yours locked away," she said. Daniel folded the knife and set the half-carved handle beside him. "You are right." Again, no argument, no excuse. It should have satisfied her. It did not. That night he slept in the front room as always, though the marriage license lay folded in the Bible and the whole town called him her husband. Mercy lay awake in the bedroom listening to the low sound of his breathing beyond the wall. She asked herself whether affection could grow in soil where a secret had already taken root. Then came the first frost warning. The sky turned a hard, clean blue, and the wind shifted north. Mercy knew the signs. If frost fell heavy before they covered the garden and gathered what remained of the late beans, they would lose food she had counted on for winter. She and Daniel worked until their hands numbed. They hauled burlap over the garden rows, moved sacks into the cellar, stacked hay tight against the barn wall, and covered the pump with old quilts. Mercy slipped once in the muddy yard while carrying a crate of apples, and Daniel caught the crate first, then her elbow, saving both without a word. By lantern light, they carried the last basket inside. Mercy was shivering by then, though she denied it when he noticed. Daniel said nothing. He only took off his coat and placed it around her shoulders, then turned away before she could refuse, giving her the mercy of not making tenderness into a question. The coat was too fine in its stitching for a poor drifter. Mercy saw it then, truly saw it. The fabric was worn and torn now, but it had not begun as a poor man's coat. The seams were strong. The lining had once been silk. Inside the inner pocket, where the cloth had ripped near the breast, a scrap of gold thread caught the lamplight. Daniel watched her notice. For a long moment, neither of them moved. "Where did you get this coat?" she asked. His face went pale in the lantern glow. "From another life," he said. Mercy held the coat tighter, not because she wanted its warmth, but because suddenly she feared the cold truth waiting inside it. Outside, frost began to silver the fields. Inside, her husband stood only a few feet away, close enough to touch, far enough to be a stranger again. And Mercy wondered how much of the man she was beginning to love had been real, and how much had been carefully hidden beneath a borrowed name. The frost did not kill the garden, but it changed the color of everything. By morning, the bean leaves hung dark at the edges, the pumpkin vines lay limp against the earth, and every fence rail shone white beneath the early sun. Mercy stepped out onto the porch with Daniel's coat still wrapped around her shoulders, though she told herself she wore it only because the air was cold. The fine torn lining brushed her wrist, soft as a secret. Daniel was already in the yard, breaking ice from the water trough with the back of an axe. He looked up when the porch board creaked. For one quiet second, husband and wife only watched each other across the silvered morning. There was tenderness between them now, and that was the trouble. Tenderness made unanswered questions heavier. A secret from a stranger was a locked door. A secret from a husband was a wall built through the center of the house. Mercy came down the steps. "D.W.," she said. Daniel's axe stilled. She touched the stitched letters inside the coat. "Those are your initials." "Yes." "Daniel W." "Yes." The single word gave her so little that she almost laughed from the hurt of it. "You see how generous you are being with truth." His face tightened. "Mercy." "No, not like that." She looked toward the fields, needing the wide land to steady her voice. "Do not say my name as if tenderness can cover what honesty will not." He lowered the axe and stood very still. She had not meant to cut him, but she saw that she had. Good, some wounded part of her thought. Then shame followed close behind. Mercy did not want to become cruel just because she was afraid. Daniel removed his glove slowly. "Whit," he said. Mercy turned back. "My middle name is Whit." It sounded like a stone dropped down a well, something but not enough to know the depth. "And the rest?" His eyes moved toward the road. That small glance told her more than his answer did. "The rest is a name I left behind." "Names do not stay left unless they are buried," she said. "Is yours buried?" "No." "Then it may come walking up that road one day." Daniel did not answer quickly enough. Mercy felt the chill beneath the coat find her bones. "So it might." "I thought I had more time." "For what?" "To become worth knowing before you knew it." The words were quiet, and because they were quiet they found the softest place in her. Mercy hated that. She wanted anger to stand alone, clean and strong. But love, or whatever this beginning was, kept stepping into the same room and confusing things. "You are my husband," she said. "You are already worth knowing. That is what makes the hiding hurt." He looked at her then, and his eyes were bare with a fear she had not expected. Some truths change how a person is loved. Maybe, but hidden truths change whether love can breathe. The axe handle creaked under his grip. For a moment, Mercy thought he might tell her all of it. The full name. The old life. The reason a man with a fine coat and careful speech had stumbled onto her land pretending poverty was the only story he owned. Then Juniper brayed from the corral, shattering the moment like a dropped plate. Daniel looked away first. "The pump will freeze harder if I do not wrap it again." Mercy stood in the yard as he turned back to work, and something inside her withdrew one careful step. Life went on because land did not pause for wounded feelings. The wheat in the lower field needed checking. The barn loft needed straw shifted before damp set in. The stove needed wood. The hens needed feed. Marriage, Mercy was learning, was not only vows and questions. It was two bodies moving through necessity even when their hearts stood apart. Daniel worked with steady devotion, but now Mercy saw mysteries in every graceful motion. When he measured boards, he did sums in his head faster than the schoolmaster. When a hinge jammed, he fixed it with a patience that felt learned in places finer than a barn. When a peddler passed by that afternoon selling ribbon, tin cups, and old newspapers from 2 territories east, Daniel went so pale at the sight of one folded page that Mercy noticed from the porch. The peddler held it up. "News from the rail towns, ma'am. Big doings out east. The Whitcomb family." Daniel dropped the feed sack. Grain spilled across the packed dirt. The peddler stopped talking. Mercy stopped breathing. Daniel bent too quickly, gathering grain in his hands as if the mess mattered more than the name that had just crossed the yard. Whitcomb. D.W. Mercy heard the old man continue, uncertain now. "Well, anyhow, papers are 2 cents if you care for one." "I do not," Daniel said. His voice was calm, but too calm. Mercy bought the paper. Daniel did not look at her when she took it inside. She waited until supper was done, until the dishes were washed, until the lamp burned steady on the kitchen table. Daniel sat across from her, hands folded, knowing the question had already entered the house and would not leave until answered. Mercy placed the newspaper between them. The print was smudged from travel and handling. She had not read much yet, only enough to see the name Whitcomb printed near the top of a column about railroad holdings, a missing heir, and a dispute over territory charters. "Is this why you flinched?" she asked, Daniel's gaze fixed on the paper. "Yes." "Are they your people?" The silence that followed was not denial. Mercy's mouth went dry. "Daniel." He closed his eyes briefly. "I was born among them," he said. It was a strange answer, too careful, too painful. "Born among them," Mercy repeated. "Not to them." His eyes opened. "Mercy, please." "No, you do not get to ask me for mercy every time truth comes near." Her voice shook, and she despised that it did. "Are you Daniel Whitcomb?" He stood so abruptly the chair scraped hard against the floor. The sound made them both flinch. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows. Inside, Daniel looked like a man cornered not by accusation but by the grief of being seen before he was ready. "I cannot answer tonight," he said. Mercy stared at him. The hurt came swift and hot, worse than anger. "You cannot, or you will not." He looked down. That was answer enough. Mercy rose from the table. "Then sleep in the barn." His face changed. "Mercy." "Do not." Her voice broke on the edge of the word, but she held herself straight. A husband may keep silence in his heart for a time, but he does not sit at his wife's table and make her beg for his name. Daniel stood there, pale and still, and for one terrible moment Mercy wanted him to cross the room, take her hands, and tell her everything. He did not. He gathered his coat from the chair, then remembered it was still around her shoulders. His hand fell empty at his side. "Keep it," he said softly. "It is cold." Then he went out into the night. Mercy stood alone in the kitchen, wearing the coat of a man who might be poor, might be powerful, might be lost, might be lying, and might still love her in the only honest part of him left. Like this story, if you believe, the quietest hearts often carry the deepest pain, and stay close, because the truth Daniel fears is riding nearer than Mercy knows. Long after the lamp burned low, Mercy unfolded the newspaper again with trembling hands. Near the bottom of the column, beneath a stain of wagon grease, she found one sentence that made the room tilt around her. "Daniel Whitcomb, presumed missing after a road accident near the Western Line, remains heir to one of the largest railroad fortunes in the territory." Mercy did not sleep after reading the newspaper. She sat at the kitchen table until the lamp burned low and the wick smoked against the glass. The words on the page blurred, cleared, and blurred again, yet one line remained sharp enough to cut through every tender memory she had been trying to protect. "Daniel Whitcomb, presumed missing after a road accident near the Western Line, remains heir to one of the largest railroad fortunes in the territory." Heir. Fortune. Whitcomb. Mercy had known the name, the way everyone in Dry Creek Crossing knew it. The Whitcomb rails ran across half the western country. Whitcomb banks bought land notes before farmers even knew their land was in danger. Whitcomb surveyors marked hills and valleys as if God had made the earth only to be measured, sold, and joined by iron track. There were stories about that family, some admiring, some bitter. Men said Silas Whitcomb could shake hands with a governor on Monday and foreclose a widow by Friday without spilling his coffee. Women whispered that Whitcomb ladies wore silk to breakfast and diamonds to church. Children played railroad in the street and called the richest boy Daniel Whitcomb, because even children understood that name meant power. Mercy folded the paper with shaking hands. Her husband was sleeping in the barn because she had sent him there. Her husband, who had come to her fence with dust on his boots and shame in his eyes. Her husband, who had said he had nothing. Mercy stood so quickly the chair legs scraped across the floor. She took one step toward the door, then stopped. Anger said to cross the yard. Pride said to wait until morning. Hurt said nothing at all. Hurt only sat in her chest, heavy and stunned, like a bird that had flown into glass. She did not go to him. At dawn she was kneading bread with more force than the dough deserved when hoofbeats sounded on the road. Not the slow creak of Mrs. Crowley's wagon, not the uneven plod of a farmer's mule. These hoofbeats came crisp and measured, a rider moving with purpose and money beneath him. Mercy wiped her hands and went to the porch. A bay horse appeared past the willow, glossy as polished chestnut. The man astride it wore a dark traveling coat, leather gloves, and a hat too clean for any honest errand across muddy roads. Behind him came a second rider leading a packhorse with saddlebags stamped in gold letters. W. Mercy gripped the porch rail. The first rider slowed at the gate and looked at the farmhouse, the barn, the mended fence, and finally Mercy herself. His gaze was not rude, but it was trained by a world that measured worth before speaking. "Good morning," he called. "I am looking for Mr. Daniel Whitcomb." The name struck the yard like thunder. Mercy did not answer. Daniel came out of the barn at that exact moment, coatless, sleeves rolled, his face rough with sleeplessness. He stopped when he saw the rider. The man on the bay went pale, then he removed his hat. "Mr. Whitcomb," he said, with a relief so deep it sounded almost like grief. "Thank the Lord. We have searched every road from Milton Ridge to the western line." Mercy felt the porch shift beneath her feet, though it did not move. Daniel's eyes went first to the rider, then to her. In that look, Mercy saw apology, dread, and the terrible knowledge that what he had refused to give her had finally been delivered by a stranger in her own yard. "Leander," Daniel said quietly. The rider dismounted. "Your uncle is ill with worry. Half the company is in confusion. There are papers requiring your hand, men claiming you may be dead, and your cousin Edmund pressing the board for authority in your absence." His gaze flicked toward Mercy. "I beg pardon. I did not know you were lodging with a family." Mercy laughed once. It was a small, broken sound that surprised even her. "Lodging," she said. Daniel flinched. Leander looked between them, uncertainty tightening his mouth. "Sir." Daniel took one step toward the porch, but Mercy lifted her hand. He stopped. That obedience hurt worse than if he had ignored her because it reminded her of the man she knew, or thought she knew. "Tell him," she said. Daniel's throat moved. "Leander, this is Mercy." The rider bowed slightly. "Miss Vale." Daniel closed his eyes for half a breath. "Mrs. Whitcomb." The second rider's head snapped up. Leander went utterly still. Mercy had never felt so small and so exposed in her life. Flour dust clung to her sleeves. Her hair was pinned badly because she had not cared what the morning made of her. Her dress was plain and faded at the cuffs. She stood on a porch with one repaired step and a shotgun inside the door, while two men from Daniel's hidden world stared at her as if she had appeared in a place no map had marked. "Your wife," Leander said. "Yes," Daniel answered. The word should have warmed her. Instead, it burned. Leander recovered faster than Mercy expected. He removed his hat again, deeper this time. "Mrs. Whitcomb, forgive me. We had no notice." "No," Mercy said. "Neither did I." The yard fell silent. Daniel's face changed as if the words had struck him full in the chest. Leander turned sharply toward him. sir." Daniel did not look away from Mercy. She did not know my full name. The second rider made a low sound under his breath. Leander's expression tightened with shock. He was too disciplined to speak. Mercy came down one porch step. "Ask him what he told me," she said, her voice still quiet. Quiet was all she had left. "Ask Mr. Daniel Whitcomb what he told the woman who gave him water. Ask him what name he used when he slept in her barn. Ask him what he owned when he stood in Reverend Pike's church and let her bind her life to his." Daniel's hands curled at his sides. "Mercy," he said, "please let me explain." "When?" she asked. The single word seemed to empty the air. She came down another step. "When were you going to explain? Before winter? After harvest? After I had given you every corner of this house? After the town had laughed itself sick over the poor stranger I married out of kindness?" "I never laughed at you." "No," her voice trembled now. "That is what makes it worse." Leander stepped back, clearly wishing to become invisible. The other rider found great interest in his reins. Mercy faced Daniel fully. "You let me think I was helping a man with no coin, no people, no place in the world. You sat at my table while I counted pennies for flour. You watched me worry over my father's debt while your family name could buy the bank that holds it." Daniel's face was pale. "I know." "You know?" She shook her head. "No, Daniel, you feared, you hid, you waited. But you did not know what it would do to me when the truth arrived wearing a clean coat and calling you sir." His eyes glistened, but he did not defend himself. That, too, was unbearable. Mercy wanted him to deny it. Wanted him to say the paper lied, the writer mistook him, the name meant nothing. She wanted the poor stranger back, the man who patched her roof, burned breakfast, and looked at her as if her small farmhouse had given him the first peace he had ever known. But that man had been real, and so was this one. That was the cruelty of it. Leander cleared his throat softly. "Mr. Whitcomb, your uncle sent letters. There are urgent matters." Daniel did not turn. "They can wait." "They truly cannot, sir." Daniel's voice hardened, and for the first time Mercy heard command in it. Not anger, authority, old and practiced. "They will wait." Leander lowered his head. "Yes, sir." Mercy stared at Daniel as if she had just heard a foreign language spoken from her husband's mouth. There he was. Not Daniel with no last name, not the man who asked where to stack wood. Daniel Whitcomb, a man obeyed by riders in fine coats, a man whose absence unsettled companies, a man whose signature could move land, money, and futures, a man who had slept beside her kitchen stove and let her believe he had nowhere else to go. Mercy stepped back onto the porch. "I need you to leave the house," she said. Daniel's face broke open with pain. "Mercy." "I do not mean the farm, not yet." She hated that even now she could not send him into nothing because nothing had never been his. "Use the barn, speak with your men, write your letters, be whoever you are, but do not come into my kitchen today." He bowed his head. No argument, no plea. Only acceptance, which somehow made the tears burn hotter behind her eyes. Mrs. Crowley's wagon appeared at the bend in the road then because the world was merciless in its timing. She slowed at the sight of the fine horses, the riders, Daniel standing bareheaded in the yard, and Mercy gripping the porch rail like it was the last honest thing left. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, Dry Creek Crossing's sharpest tongue had no words. Mercy turned away before anyone could see her face crumble. She entered the house, shut the door, and stood with her back against it, flowers still on her hands, a rich man's coat hanging from the peg beside her, and a poor man's promises scattered like broken glass across the floor of her heart. Outside, Daniel Whitcomb spoke low to the men who had found him. Inside, Mercy covered her mouth and asked the question she feared would haunt her longer than the lie itself. Had he married her because he loved her, or because she had been the first safe hiding place his fortune could not reach? For 3 days, Mercy Vale lived in the same yard as her husband and spoke to him only when the farm required it. The words were small, hard, and plain. "The hens need feed." "The east gate is loose." "Rain may come by morning." Daniel received each one like a sentence handed down in court. He did not ask for softness. He did not stand in the kitchen doorway and plead. He slept in the barn, washed at the pump, took his meals from a covered plate she left on the porch, and worked from dawn until the light failed, as if labor could say what his mouth no longer had the right to ask. Mercy hated that part most. She wanted him to turn proud. She wanted Daniel Whitcomb, heir to rails and banks and land, to reveal some hidden arrogance that would make anger easy. She wanted him to grow impatient and say she was overreacting. She wanted him to toss money at the problem so she could despise him cleanly. He did none of it. He mended the east gate. He hauled water. He replaced a broken rung on the barn ladder. He stood aside when she passed. He spoke gently to Juniper. He left space around her grief as carefully as he had once left space around her body when their marriage was new. That made the wound worse because the man who had lied was still kind. On the first morning after the reveal, Leander Marsh came to the porch with his hat held in both hands. He had the uncomfortable bearing of a man trained for business but placed in a house of heartbreak, where no ledger could help him. "Mrs. Whitcomb," he said. Mercy, who was scrubbing a pot harder than necessary at the washstand, did not look up. "My name is Mercy Vale." He paused. "Of course, Mrs. Vale." "That is not right either." She rinsed the pot and set it down, "but it is closer." Leander swallowed. "I mean no disrespect, Mr. Whitcomb asked that you not be troubled, but there are documents from the company requiring acknowledgement of his safety. I need to know whether the parlor may be used briefly." Mercy looked past him to the yard, where Daniel stood near the barn with the second rider and a stack of papers spread across an upturned crate. He had not come to the porch himself. He had sent Leander because she had told him not to enter her kitchen, and he was still obeying. The restraint stung. "No," she said. Leander's brows lifted. "This is my house," Mercy said, "not a Whitcomb office. If he needs to sign papers, he can sign them in the barn where I first took him in." Leander looked as if he wanted to object, then thought better of it. "Yes, ma'am." He turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it may be worth, he has refused every carriage, room, and comfort I have suggested." Mercy dried her hands. "That is his choice." "Yes." Leander hesitated. "He said he would not live grandly on the edge of your pain." The words landed too softly to fight. Mercy turned away. "Tell him his thoughtfulness came late." Leander bowed his head and left. By noon, the town knew. Of course it did. Mrs. Crowley had not spoken. Mercy believed that much. The widow had driven away from Willow Bend with a pale face and an unusually tight mouth. But gossip needed only hoofprints, fine saddlebags, a gold W, and 2 riders asking at the livery for feed charged to the Whitcomb account. By afternoon, Dry Creek Crossing had remade its opinion so fast the old one nearly left smoke. Mercy learned it when she went to town for salt, lamp oil, and the mail. The same women who had whispered about her keeping a nameless drifter now turned to look as if she had accidentally become royalty. Mr. Gable came around the counter himself and offered to carry her purchases. Mrs. Albright from the milliner's shop smiled with all her teeth. 2 men standing near the stove removed their hats. Banker Amos Tuttle stepped out of his office before Mercy could pass. "Mrs. Whitcomb," he said, warm as butter left too near the stove. "Or shall I say Mrs. Vale Whitcomb, a remarkable turn of events." Mercy stopped in the street. "You may say nothing at all." His smile flickered, then returned. "I hope you understand that any prior conversations about your father's note were simply matters of business. Naturally, with your new circumstances, the bank is prepared to extend every courtesy." Mercy looked at the polished brass sign beside his door, Tuttle Savings and Loan. Only days ago that sign had frightened her. Now the man beneath it was bowing with careful respect because he believed she had married power. The shame of it burned in a new way. "I have no new circumstances," she said. Tuttle blinked. "I beg pardon." "My father's debt remains my father's debt. My land remains my land. And I remain the same woman you were pleased to lecture about reputation last week." A few people nearby grew very still. Tuttle lowered his voice. "Surely you will allow your husband to settle the note." A Whitcomb does not need to carry such small obligations. Mercy stepped closer. That small obligation kept me awake for 2 years. Do not make it little now because a rich name has entered the story. His cheeks reddened. She turned before he could answer and walked to the wagon with her goods in her arms, refusing help from every hat-tipping man who suddenly remembered she had hands worth sparing. Mrs. Crowley waited beside Juniper. For once, she did not begin with a question. She took the flour sack from Mercy's arms and set it in the wagon. Mercy allowed it because her hands were shaking and because the widow did not look curious. She looked sorry. "I did not tell them," Mrs. Crowley said. "I know. They found out through the livery." "I know that too." Mrs. Crowley looked toward the bank, where Tuttle had retreated inside. Folks are fools when poverty stands in front of them and bigger fools when money does. Mercy let out a breath that almost became a sob. She caught it in time. Mrs. Crowley pretended not to notice. "Do you want me to drive out with you?" "No." "Do you want me to sit here until you stop looking like the Lord himself moved the road beneath your feet?" Mercy looked at the older woman then. The kindness in her face was rough, embarrassed, and real. "I am not hurt because he is rich," Mercy whispered. "I know. Everyone thinks I should be pleased. Everyone is not married to the lie." Mercy closed her eyes. There it was. The thing she had not been able to say so clearly. Married to the lie. When she returned to Willow Bend, Daniel was in the lower field, walking behind the plow horse Leander had brought from town after Mercy's old mule strained a leg. He had removed his fine shirt and wore the same patched-work clothes as before, his boots sinking into the dark earth, hands steady on the plow handles. From a distance, he looked exactly like the poor man she had married. That was the cruelty. From a distance, her heart still recognized him. Mercy carried the goods inside, then stood by the window watching him until sunset. Every furrow he cut was straight, every turn careful. He had no need to do that work now. He could have bought fields already planted, hired men by the dozen, paid off every debt within sight. Instead, he walked behind the plow like penance. After supper, Mercy took his covered plate to the barn herself. Daniel rose from the hay bale as soon as she entered. He looked thinner somehow, though only days had passed. His beard had darkened along his jaw, and his eyes carried the raw look of a man who had not slept. "You should not have come out in the cold," he said. The concern nearly broke her. "Do not care for me right now," she said. "I cannot bear it." He went still. She set the plate on a crate between them. "I need to ask you something, and I need you not to answer like a frightened man protecting himself." Daniel lowered his gaze. "Ask." Mercy's fingers curled in her skirt. "Was I chosen, Daniel, or was I useful?" His face lifted sharply. She forced herself to continue. "Was this farm only a place to hide? Was my loneliness convenient? Was my kindness something you stepped into because it felt better than your own life?" "No," he said, and the word came so quickly, so painfully that it echoed in the rafters. "No, Mercy." "Then why did you marry me without telling me what I was marrying?" His mouth opened, but no answer came. Mercy nodded slowly, tears burning but not falling. "That is what I thought." She turned toward the barn door. "Because I was afraid," Daniel said behind her. She stopped but did not face him. His voice shook now. "Not of losing money, not of losing comfort. I was afraid of losing the only look I had ever received that did not measure me first." Mercy gripped the doorframe. "I know that does not excuse it," he said. "I know fear does not make a lie clean." "No," she whispered, "it does not. I loved you before you knew my name." Her eyes closed. The words were the ones she had wanted. They were also too late to heal what they touched. Mercy opened the barn door, letting in a thin blade of moonlight. "Then prove it by telling the truth when it costs you something, not when it has already been dragged into the yard." She stepped outside before he could answer. Behind her, Daniel did not follow. And Mercy walked back to the house beneath a sky full of hard, bright stars, knowing the worst pain was not that her husband had been someone else. It was that she still believed the man beneath the name might have loved her. The next morning, Mercy found an envelope on the porch. It lay beneath a smooth creek stone, placed where the wind could not take it and where she could not step outside without seeing it. The paper was plain, not the thick cream stationery Leander carried in his leather case. Daniel had torn it from the back of an account ledger and folded it with hands she could almost picture, careful and hesitant, as if even paper deserved gentleness. Her name was written across the front. Mercy, not Mrs. Whitcomb, not Miss Vale, not wife, just Mercy. She stood in the cold morning light for a long while before picking it up. The farm waited around her with its usual demands. The rooster called from behind the smokehouse. Juniper stomped near the corral. Frost clung to the weeds along the fence line, each white stem shining as if the whole earth had turned fragile overnight. Mercy carried the letter inside and set it on the kitchen table. Then she made coffee. Then she fed the stove. Then she swept a floor that did not need sweeping. Only after there was nothing left to delay with did she sit, break the fold, and read. Mercy, if you choose not to read past this line, I will not blame you. I have asked too much of your trust already. But last night you told me to prove love by telling the truth when it costs something. So here is the truth, with no soft edges and no hiding behind fear. I am Daniel Whitcomb, son of Gideon Whitcomb, nephew of Silas Whitcomb, and heir to a railroad fortune I never built with my own hands. Mercy stopped. The full name looked strange in her kitchen. Too grand for the scratched table. Too heavy for the blue cup beside it, too alive with everything he had kept from her. She forced herself to continue. My father was not an evil man, but he believed a name mattered more than the soul carrying it. He taught me to shake hands before I knew how to judge a heart. He taught me land was power, money was protection, and affection was often a bargain dressed up for Sunday. When I was 14, I learned that men laughed harder at my jokes after they found out who my father was. When I was 17, I learned that a friend could sell a secret for a favor. When I was 22, I learned that a woman could look at me with tears in her eyes and still be looking past me toward my inheritance. Mercy's fingers tightened on the page. She did not want pity to enter the room. Not yet. Not when anger was the only thing keeping her upright. But the words were not asking pity. They were laying stones across a river, one painful truth at a time. The woman was named Evelyn Marr. I thought I loved her. Maybe I did, in the young, foolish way a man loves the first person who tells him he is lonely and then stands close enough to prove she sees it. She did not know my name at first. For 3 weeks, I believed myself loved as Daniel. Then my cousin Edmund told her who I was. After that, every word changed. Her dreams became our estates. Her worries became my influence. Her affection became careful. I do not write this to shame her. Maybe she only wanted security in a world that gives women too little of it. But I could no longer tell where her tenderness ended and hunger began. Mercy lowered the letter. Outside the window, Daniel stood near the barn speaking with Leander. He did not glance toward the house. His posture was straight, but she knew him well enough now to see the strain in it. He looked like a man waiting for a door either to open or to be barred forever. She looked back at the letter. After my father died, Uncle Silas tried to make me into the kind of Whitcomb he understood. I sat in boardrooms. I signed papers. I watched men speak of farms as parcels, widows as obligations, creeks as water rights, and families as labor supply. I argued more than I obeyed. I gave money quietly where I could, bought back notes when I could, stopped cruel deals when I saw them, but always the name stood between me and whatever good I meant to do. If I gave, people bowed. If I refused, people feared me. If I asked for honesty, people told me what they thought a Whitcomb wanted to hear. Mercy thought of Banker Tuttle smiling in the street. She thought of hats being removed, voices softening, old insults turning into courtesy the moment money entered the tale. She knew that ugliness now. She hated that Daniel had known it first. The road accident was real. Our wagon broke near the western line. One horse bolted, one man was hurt but not badly, and in the confusion I walked away. That is the part I am most ashamed to write. I did not walk because I had to. I walked because for one reckless hour I wanted to know what would happen if Daniel Whitcomb disappeared and only Daniel remained. Then I reached your fence. Mercy's breath caught, though she did not mean for it to. You gave me water before you asked what I owned. You asked my name and I should have told you all of it. Instead, I gave you the smallest piece of truth and called it enough. That was the first lie. Every day after it became another. When you gave me bread, I should have told you. When you let me sleep in the barn, I should have told you. When Reverend Pike spoke of marriage, I should have told you before you ever stood beside me in church. I did not. That is my sin, not yours. Mercy pressed one hand to her mouth. She had wanted him to say it plainly. Now that he had, the plainness hurt. I married you because I loved you. I married you because you were brave, stubborn, kind, and honest in a way I had nearly stopped believing people could be. I married you because your farm felt like the first true place I had ever stood. But I also married you while hiding what you had a right to know, and love does not make that honorable. Fear does not make it innocent. If you choose to send me away, I will go. If you choose to keep the land apart from me, I will sign whatever paper protects it. If you choose never to take the Whitcomb name, I will not ask it of you. If you want your father's debt settled without my hand touching your pride, Leander can arrange to sell the note back to you for $1 through a trust in your father's name, but only if you wish it and only with the truth written plain. I will not buy forgiveness. I will not press it from you. I will not call your pain unfair. I will remain on the farm only as long as you permit, and if I remain, it will be as the man who hauls water, mends fence, and answers every question you ask. There are no more hidden names. Daniel Whitcomb. Mercy read the last line twice, then a third time. The room seemed painfully quiet after it. The letter had not healed her. It had not folded the betrayal neatly and put it away. If anything, it made the wound clearer. He had known better. He had seen the line before crossing it. He had loved her, yes, but he had also used her ignorance as shelter. And yet he had not excused it. That mattered. Mercy sat until the coffee went cold. Near noon, Mrs. Crowley came with a covered dish and no pretense that she was passing by. She stepped inside, saw the letter on the table, and did not ask to read it. "He tell you?" the widow asked. "Some." "Enough." Mercy looked toward the window. Daniel was alone now, repairing the lower fence where a steer from the neighboring range had pressed through. His shoulders moved with the rhythm of work, familiar, painful, dear. "No," Mercy said, "but more than before." Mrs. Crowley set the dish down. "That may be the first honest road back, if you want one." "I do not know what I want." "That is allowed." Mercy looked at her. "Everyone keeps acting as if I gained something." "You did gain something," Mrs. Crowley said. Mercy's expression hardened. The widow lifted one hand. "Not money, not standing, truth. A hard truth, late and poorly delivered, but truth all the same. Now you get to decide with open eyes instead of kind ones only." The word stayed with Mercy after she left. That evening, Mercy walked to the barn carrying the letter. Daniel stood when he saw her, but he did not come close. "Did you read it?" he asked. "Yes." His face tightened. "All of it." "All of it." The lantern between them cast shadows up the beams. Hay rustled softly overhead. This was where he had first slept. This was where the lie had been born into routine, where a nameless man had folded blankets, washed plates, and made himself worthy while leaving one truth untouched. Mercy held up the letter. "You said you would answer every question." "I will." "If I ask you something and the answer makes me hate you for a while, will you still tell it?" Daniel swallowed. "Yes." "If I ask about your family, your money, the woman before me, the men you command, the papers you sign, and every part of the life you hid?" "Yes." "If I ask whether you would have told me without Leander riding in?" The pain crossed his face before the answer came. "I do not know," he said. Mercy closed her eyes briefly. It was the cruelest, honest answer he could have given. It was also the first answer she fully believed. Comment where you are watching from and tell me if love can survive a hidden truth when the heart behind it was afraid but real. Mercy folded the letter and lowered her hand. Then tomorrow, after chores, you will sit at my table, not as a poor stranger, not as Mr. Whitcomb, as my husband if you still claim that word, and you will begin again from the first thing you should have told me. Daniel's eyes filled, though no tear fell. I still claim it, he said softly, but only if you allow me to earn the right. Mercy turned toward the barn door. She did not forgive him. She did not take his hand. But she did leave the door open behind her, and in the darkness between them, that small mercy felt like the first fragile sound of thaw. Daniel came to the kitchen the next evening with no fine coat, no company papers, and no one speaking for him. Mercy heard his boots on the porch before he knocked. That small courtesy, after weeks of marriage and shared work and hurt that now filled every room, made her close her eyes for a moment. He was asking permission to enter the house where he had once belonged by vow. He was standing outside like a stranger again, because in some ways that was what he had made himself. She opened the door. Daniel stood with his hat in both hands. His hair had been combed, though the wind had already worried it loose. He wore the plain work shirt she had washed 2 days before and the patched trousers he had worn while mending the north fence. He looked tired. Not poorly rested, but worn in the soul. I can come another time, he said. No, Mercy stepped back. You can come now. He entered slowly. The kitchen seemed to change around him. The stove gave off steady heat. Bread cooled beneath a cloth. The lamp on the table threw gold light over the scratches her father had left in the wood. For a moment Mercy remembered him burning breakfast, smiling at her cornmeal mush, making the house feel less empty without asking anything in return. Then she remembered the newspaper. She sat first. Daniel sat across from her only after she nodded. Between them lay the letter he had written, folded but visible, as if Mercy wanted it there to remind them both that truth had finally entered the house in ink before it could enter in voice. Start with your name, she said. His hands tightened around the brim of his hat. Daniel Whitcomb. Why Whit twice? It is an old family vanity. My mother's people were named Whittaker. My father wanted her remembered but not enough to let her name stand whole. So I was given Whit as a middle name and Whitcomb as the family name. Daniel Whitcomb. Mercy absorbed that, surprised by the sadness in it. Your mother is dead. Yes, I was 12. Did she love you as Daniel or as a Whitcomb? The question left Mercy before she could soften it. Daniel did not flinch away. As Daniel, I think that is why losing her made the rest feel colder. Mercy looked down at the table. She had not asked to pity him. But she understood the way a parent's death could change the temperature of the whole world. Go on, she said. So he did. He told her of the Whitcomb house east of Milton Ridge, a long white mansion set behind iron gates with a view of the rail yard and the river. He spoke of a nursery that had been too quiet after his mother died, of tutors, ledgers, dinners where men talked about land in numbers and women in alliances. He told her that his father, Gideon, had believed softness was something a wealthy man could not afford, and that Uncle Silas had believed kindness was useful only when it improved public standing. Daniel had grown up learning the price of everything and the worth of almost nothing. Mercy listened with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles paled. When he spoke of Evelyn Marr, he did not make her a villain. Mercy noticed that. He said Evelyn had been clever, charming, and frightened of poverty in a way society women were not supposed to admit. He said she had liked him when he was merely Daniel Whit from a smaller rail office, or perhaps had liked the freedom of not knowing enough to calculate. Then she learned the full name, and slowly all her dreams began wearing Whitcomb colors. She asked once how many acres would be mine, he said quietly. Not in greed, perhaps, maybe in fear. But after that, when she touched my hand, I wondered what she felt first, skin or title. Mercy's throat tightened against her will. Did you love her? She asked. I thought I did. He looked at her fully. Not the way I love you. The words reached across the table. Mercy did not let them take her hand. You do not get to use love as a bridge whenever the river grows hard to cross, she said. Daniel bowed his head. You are right. She hated how often he said that now. She hated that he meant it. Outside, wind moved along the eaves, but the patched roof held firm above them. Mercy could hear that too, the silence where leaking used to be. His work remained honest even where his name had not been. "Tell me about the road accident," she said. Daniel drew a slow breath. "We were traveling west because Edmund, my cousin, had been urging the company to pressure smaller landholders near this territory. He wanted rail access through valleys that would ruin more farms than it helped. Uncle Silas was ill, my father gone, and I was expected to sign authority to him if I chose to remain absent from company management. I came west to stop him." Mercy's eyes narrowed. "You came here because of land?" "Yes." "My land?" "No," he answered quickly, then paused. "Not directly, but this region, yes. Dry Creek Crossing sits near a route Edmund has wanted surveyed." Mercy stood so suddenly her chair scraped the floor. Daniel rose too, but did not come toward her. "You knew that?" she asked. "Not when I reached your fence. I knew the company wanted a western pass. I did not know your father's note had been bought by Tuttle with Whitcomb backing until Leander brought the papers." Mercy felt the room tilt in a new way. "What does that mean?" Daniel's face tightened with shame. "It means banker Tuttle owes more to my family's company than he lets your town know. It means he has been gathering debts on farms that may sit near the route. It means your fear was not foolish, Mercy. It was useful to men like him." For a moment Mercy could not speak, the debt beneath her bed, the sleepless nights, Tuttle's polite warnings, his sudden softness after learning Daniel's name. All of it seemed to gather around her like smoke. "And you can fix that?" she asked, bitter before she could stop herself. One signature from Daniel Whitcomb and all the small people breathe again. Daniel's eyes held pain, but he did not look away. "I can stop Edmund's plan. I can force Tuttle to release unfair notes. I can pay what is owed. But I know that does not fix what I did to you." "No," she said, "it does not." The words came cold, but her anger had changed shape. It was no longer only for herself. It stretched toward every farmer who had stood in that bank with a hat in hand, thinking debt was weather instead of a trap built by men with clean gloves. Mercy paced to the stove, then back again. "Did you ever think," she said, "that while you were trying to find out whether someone could love you without your money, I was trying to survive a world controlled by men with money?" Daniel closed his eyes. Mercy's voice shook, but she kept going. "You hid from your power in my barn. I was living under it without knowing your hand was near the rope." "I know," he said. "Do you?" His eyes opened, wet and steady. "I am beginning to." That answer stopped her because it did not pretend to be enough. For a long while neither spoke. The lamp hissed softly. Somewhere outside, a horse stamped near the barn. Mercy looked at the man before her, and for the first time since the reveal she saw the whole cruel knot of him. A wealthy man wounded by false love. A frightened man hiding behind poverty. A husband who had lied. A man with enough power to harm her without meaning to, and perhaps enough conscience to stop those who meant to. She did not know how to love all of that. She did not know if she could. Daniel reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded paper. He set it on the table, then stepped back. "What is that?" Mercy asked. "A deed protection agreement. Leander wrote it at my instruction. It says Willow Bend remains yours alone, not mine by marriage, not Whitcomb property, not company interest. Yours, I signed it already. It needs no forgiveness from you to stand." Mercy stared at the paper. Her breath caught in a place between relief and insult, gratitude and grief. "You should have asked me before deciding what I needed." "Yes," he said, "but I should have protected you before I asked anything more of your heart." She did not touch the paper, not yet. Daniel picked up his hat. "I will go." "Wait." He stilled. Mercy looked at him across the lamplit room. "Tomorrow you will go into town." "Yes." "You will speak to Tuttle, Reverend Pike, Mr. Gable, Mrs. Crowley, and anyone else who wants to hear. You will tell them I was not a schemer who trapped a rich man. You will tell them you lied by omission. You will tell them I gave shelter to a man who let me believe he was poor. You will not make yourself noble. You will not make me pitiable. You will tell it plain." Daniel's face changed. Pain, yes, but also respect. "I will," he said, "and after that you will start undoing whatever your family money has done to this town." "Yes." Mercy's voice lowered. "That still will not mean I forgive you." "I know. It may not mean I stay your wife in the way you hope. I know that too." She turned toward the window, where night reflected her face back at her, pale and stern and lonelier than she wanted to be. "But if you tell the truth publicly," she said, "then maybe I can believe the truth privately someday." Daniel stood silent behind her for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with feeling. "That is more grace than I deserve." Mercy did not turn around. "Grace is not forgiveness," she said. "No," he answered softly, "but I will honor it." He left then, closing the door with care. Mercy remained at the window until his footsteps faded across the yard. Only then did she go to the table and touch the deed paper with 2 fingers as if it might burn. Outside, the repaired fence cut a dark line under the moon. Inside, Mercy understood that trust was not coming back like sunrise, all at once and certain. It would have to return like a fence rebuilt after storm damage, rail by rail, post by post, with both people seeing every nail driven in. Daniel Whitcomb walked into Dry Creek crossing the next morning beside Mercy's wagon, not riding ahead of it, not seated like a gentleman while she held the reins, and not surrounded by Leander Marsh and the second rider as if wealth needed a guard around it. He walked. Mercy drove Juniper with her shoulders straight and her face calm enough to make people wonder what it had cost her. The town appeared slowly in the pale morning, its church steeple rising over the cottonwoods, its bank windows catching the sun, its mercantile porch already crowded with men pretending they had business there. Word had gone ahead of them. Word always did. By the time Mercy stopped before Gable's Mercantile, half the town had found some reason to stand within hearing distance. Mrs. Crowley stood near the hitching rail, wearing her black bonnet and the expression of a woman prepared to strike down foolishness with one look. Reverend Pike waited by the church steps. Banker Tuttle came out last, smoothing his vest, his face polished into a smile that did not reach his eyes. Daniel helped Mercy down from the wagon. She allowed his hand only long enough to keep from slipping, then stepped away. He accepted that too. The small space between them said more than any shout could have. It told the town that the matter was not settled just because money had entered it. It told them Mercy Vale had not become soft with fortune. It told Daniel, most of all, that every inch nearer to her heart would have to be earned in daylight. He removed his hat. "My name is Daniel Whitcomb," he said. A stir moved through the crowd. Though everyone already knew it, hearing the full name spoken in that steady voice made the truth feel larger. Men shifted. Women glanced at Mercy. Banker Tuttle's smile tightened. Daniel continued. "Weeks ago, I came to Mercy Vale's fence exhausted, without a horse, without money on me, and without the courage to speak my full name. She gave me water. She gave me shelter in her barn. She gave me work so I could keep my dignity. I let her believe I was a poor stranger with nothing to offer but my hands." Mercy looked straight ahead, but every word seemed to touch her skin. Daniel's voice remained clear. "When gossip threatened her good name, I married her. I did so because I loved her, but I did it while hiding a truth she had every right to know. That wrong belongs to me alone. Mercy did not trap me. She did not scheme. She did not chase a fortune. She married the man she believed me to be, and I failed to tell her all that man was." Silence held the street. No wagon wheel creaked. No boot scraped. Even the horses seemed to listen. Mrs. Crowley's chin trembled once, though she lifted it quickly. Daniel turned toward Banker Tuttle. "There is another truth that must be spoken. The Whitcomb Company has backed notes purchased by this bank and others in the region. Those notes have been used to pressure farmers along a proposed railroad route. Some of that pressure was legal. Much of it was not honorable. I did not know the full reach of it when I came here, but ignorance does not free me from responsibility for a name that gave men courage to be cruel." Tuttle's face flushed red. "Mr. Whitcomb, this is hardly the place for business discussion." "This is exactly the place," Daniel said. The authority Mercy had heard once in her yard returned, but this time it did not make her feel small. It moved outward, toward the men who had made others small. Daniel took a folded packet from his coat and handed it to Reverend Pike. "These are notices of review for every farm note tied to the western route, including Willow Bend. No foreclosure, sale, survey pressure, or transfer will proceed until each is examined. Any note bought under threat, hidden company backing, or unfair terms will be released or rewritten publicly." A murmur rose through the crowd. Tuttle stepped forward. "You cannot simply overturn contracts because sentiment has clouded your judgment." Daniel looked at him. "I can overturn company backing obtained through deception. I can remove Whitcomb credit from your bank. I can ask the territorial court to examine how you gathered those notes, and I can do all of it without sentiment." Tuttle stopped. The town saw it. Mercy saw it. For the first time, the banker who had leaned over so many frightened farmers stood with fear in his own eyes. Daniel did not look pleased by it. That mattered to Mercy. Power used for revenge had a taste to it. This was not that. This was correction, late and imperfect, but real. Reverend Pike opened the packet with solemn hands. Mr. Gable stepped closer, his face pale with hope he was trying not to show. A farmer named Harlan Bell, whose west pasture had been nearly taken that spring, removed his hat and pressed it to his chest. Daniel turned back to the crowd. "If any man or woman here spoke poorly of Mercy because she showed mercy to me, take your shame to God and do better. She stood honest when I did not. She worked when others judged. She protected her father's land without once asking what a rich man could give her. If you respect her more now because of my name, then you understand neither her nor respect." The words landed hard. Mercy's throat tightened until breathing hurt. Not because the speech fixed everything. It did not. Not because public truth erased private lies. It could not. But because Daniel had done what she asked without softening his fault or borrowing nobility from confession. He had told it plain. Afterward, people approached in uneasy waves. Some apologized awkwardly. Some offered blessings that felt too late. Mrs. Crowley took Mercy's hand and squeezed it once hard. "You made him stand in the light," she whispered. "No," Mercy said, watching Daniel speak quietly with Harlan Bell. "He chose to stand there." "That is not nothing." Mercy swallowed. "No, it is not." By afternoon, Daniel had spent 2 hours in Tuttle's bank with Leander, Reverend Pike, Mr. Gable, and 3 farmers as witnesses. Mercy did not go inside. She sat on the wagon bench beneath the elm, refusing to become audience to every correction. This was not a play staged to win her back. It was work that needed doing whether she forgave him or not. When Daniel finally came out, he looked tired but steady. He approached the wagon and stopped a respectful distance away. "Your father's note has been separated from the root holdings. No man may use it to pressure you now. I did not pay it. I had the unfair interest removed. The rest remains yours to settle or not, as you choose." Mercy studied him. He had listened. That small obedience shook something loose in her heart. "Thank you," she said. His eyes lowered briefly, as if those 2 words were more than he deserved. They rode home in near silence, Daniel walking beside the wagon again. The sun had begun dropping west, turning the dust road gold. For once, Mercy did not feel the town's gaze at her back like a burden. She felt it, yes, but it could no longer tell her who she was. Near Willow Bend, she stopped the wagon. Daniel halted too. "Is Juniper lame?" "No." Mercy looked over the land. The fields rolled brown and gold beneath the cooling sky. The barn leaned less now because Daniel had strengthened the east wall. The roof no longer leaked. The north fence stood straight where he had once been found half fallen against it. "Your uncle expects you back," she said. Daniel's face tightened. "Yes." "Your company needs you." "Yes." "Dry Creek Crossing may need you too, if your cousin Edmund presses the route." I know. Mercy held the reins loosely in her lap. And where do you want to be? His answer did not come quickly. She appreciated that. Too quick would have sounded like pleading. At Willow Bend, he said at last. Not because it hides me, not because it excuses me from being a Whitcomb, because it is the first place I learned the kind of man I wanted to be. But I will go where truth requires. If I must face my uncle, I will. If I must face Edmund, I will. If you ask me to leave this farm, I will do that too. Mercy looked at him, and the fading sunlight drew every weary line of his face. Do you still want this marriage? She asked. With all of me, he said, but not the marriage I stole through silence, only one you choose with open eyes. Her eyes burned. For so long Mercy had feared being unwanted. Then she feared she had been wanted for the wrong reasons. Now she stood between both fears, looking at a man who had wounded her and was finally refusing to hide from the wound. I am not ready for your bed, she said. His gaze softened with pain and respect. I know. I am not ready to wear your name like it never hurt me. I know. I am not ready to say forgiveness and have everyone clap as if the story is over. No one has that right. Mercy nodded, but I am ready for one thing. Daniel waited, barely breathing. Tomorrow, she said, you will take me to meet your uncle. His eyes widened. I will not have your family learn of me as some secret farm wife tucked away in Dry Creek Crossing. I will stand before them as Mercy Vale, who married Daniel Whitcomb without knowing his money and stayed long enough to demand his truth. And after that, when I have seen the world you came from, I will decide what vows can still mean between us. Daniel's face changed slowly, grief and hope crossing it together. I will take you, he said. Mercy clicked the reins and Juniper started toward home. Daniel walked beside the wagon, close enough now that his hand could have touched the wheel, but he did not reach for anything that had not been offered. The last light moved over the repaired fence, over the farmhouse, over the willow that had survived when the others died. At the porch, Mercy climbed down without help. Then she turned. You may eat in the kitchen tonight, she said. Daniel went still. Not because everything is healed, she added, because truth did not run from town today. His eyes glistened in the dusk. Thank you. Mercy stepped onto the porch. She did not look back until she reached the door. Daniel was still standing by the wagon, hat in hand, looking at the small farmhouse as if it were not a hiding place anymore, but a home he might someday be invited to enter fully. And Mercy, with one hand on the door latch, realized her heart had not forgiven him yet, but it had stopped walking away. They left for Milton Ridge the next morning in a hired carriage Leander had arranged, though Mercy refused the velvet seat cushion and sat upright in her plain blue dress, as if the road itself might test her dignity. Daniel sat across from her, not beside her. He had asked once softly whether she would prefer distance or company for the ride. Mercy had answered both somehow, and he had understood enough to give her silence without making her feel abandoned. The Whitcomb house rose near noon beyond iron gates and a long row of winter-bare elms. It was larger than any home Mercy had ever entered, white-columned and severe, with windows tall enough to make a church jealous. Men in dark coats moved near the stables. A maid opened the front door before the carriage fully stopped. Everything about the place spoke of polish, command, and old money that expected the world to make room. Mercy looked at Daniel. This is where you learn to be afraid of being loved, she asked. His eyes moved over the house with a sadness that had no pride in it. Some of it. That answer steadied her more than a grand speech would have. Inside, Uncle Silas Whitcomb waited in a chair beside a tall fireplace, wrapped in a wool robe, his once powerful frame thinned by illness but not emptied of authority. His silver hair was combed back. His eyes were sharp. Beside him stood Edmund Whitcomb, Daniel's cousin, handsome in a cold, narrow way with a mouth that seemed trained to smile without kindness. Silas looked first at Daniel, then at Mercy. So this is the wife, he said. Daniel stepped forward. This is Mercy Vale, my wife. Mercy did not miss the order of the words. Her name first, her place second. Selah studied her plain dress, her work-roughened hands, her lifted chin. "You married my nephew without knowing who he was." "I married the man standing at my fence," Mercy said. "He had less name then." Edmund gave a soft laugh. "How romantic or convenient." Daniel turned toward him. "Do not." The room went still. Mercy saw it then fully. Daniel could command this world. He had been born to it. He had run from it not because he lacked power, but because power had made every human thing around him uncertain. Silas leaned back. "You cause trouble, Daniel. The board is unsettled. The route is delayed. Tuttle is making noise. Edmund says you have let sentiment interfere with profitable expansion." "Edmund has been using pressure and hidden backing to gather farms near Dry Creek Crossing," Daniel said. "That ends." Edmund's smile vanished. "You were missing for weeks. You have no idea what the company requires." "I know what honor requires." "Honor does not lay track." "No," Daniel said, "but dishonor will not lay ours." Mercy watched Silas closely. The old man's face gave little away, but something flickered in his eyes when Daniel spoke. Not anger, recognition perhaps, or the memory of a younger man he had once been and had long since buried beneath ledgers. Daniel placed a leather folder on the table. "I have signed orders stopping the Western pressure purchases. Every farmer whose note was gathered under false company influence will receive review. Willow Bend remains Mercy's land alone, not Whitcomb property. Not collateral, not a bargaining piece." Edmund looked at Mercy with open contempt. "And what did she cost you for that?" Mercy felt Daniel move, but she lifted one hand before he spoke. "She cost him the truth," Mercy said. The words struck harder than she expected. Even Silas shifted in his chair. Mercy stepped forward, her voice calm though her heart beat fiercely. "He lied to me. He let me marry him without knowing his full name. I will not pretend that wound is gone because this house is grand or because men remove their hats for him, but I did not come here to beg acceptance. I came to see whether Daniel Whitcomb could stand in the house that made him afraid and still speak honestly." She looked at Daniel then, "And he has." Daniel's eyes softened, but he did not reach for her. Not yet. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at his nephew. "Your father would have called this weakness." Daniel nodded. "I know." "And what do you call it?" Daniel looked at Mercy, then back to his uncle. "The first honest strength I have had." The old man closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the hard edge in him had dulled. "Then see that you do not waste it." That evening they returned to Willow Bend under a sky washed pink by sunset. Mercy had seen the grand house. She had seen the family name in its own kingdom. She had seen Daniel refuse to bow to the worst parts of it, but forgiveness did not arrive in the carriage with them. It came slower. It came over the following weeks, as Daniel answered questions even when shame made him quiet. It came when he signed no paper without showing her first. It came when he slept in the front room until Mercy herself moved his blanket no closer, but folded it one morning and placed it at the foot of the bedroom chest. It came when he did not touch her hand until she offered it. It came when he let her pay the fair part of her father's note from the farm's own earnings, while he removed only the dishonest weight men had added to it. Spring arrived with green shoots in the lower field and meadowlarks singing along the fence. On a clear Sunday after church, Mercy and Daniel stood before Reverend Pike again, not for a grand wedding, not for society, and not for the town's approval. Mrs. Crowley stood nearby with a handkerchief already in hand. Leander watched from the back with quiet respect. A few farmers gathered along the church steps, men and women whose notes had been restored, whose homes had been spared, whose eyes now held gratitude without fear. Mercy wore the same plain blue dress. Daniel wore a clean dark coat, but no gold pin, no company mark, no sign of wealth except the steadiness with which he looked at his wife. Reverend Pike opened the Bible, but Mercy spoke first. "I married you once without knowing all of you," she said. "Today I know more. Not everything, because no heart is learned in a season. But I know your name, I know your fear, I know your wrong, I know your effort to repair it. I will not be bought, hidden, or carried like a prize into your world." I stand here as Mercy Vale, daughter of this land, and I choose to remain your wife because truth has finally been given room to live between us." Daniel's face trembled with feeling. "I hid my name from you," he said. "I let fear call itself caution. I accepted your trust without giving you the whole truth in return. I cannot undo that. But I vow before God, before this town, and before the woman who saved me when I deserved no saving, that I will never again ask love to live in the dark. My name, my past, my money, my choices, and my heart will stand open to you. And if I spend the rest of my life proving that Daniel is truer than Whitcomb, I will count that life blessed." Mercy's eyes filled. This time when he reached for her hand, she gave it freely. Reverend Pike asked if they renewed their vows, and their answers came clear. "I do," Daniel said. "I do," Mercy said, not quickly, not foolishly, not because the hurt had never happened, because honesty had finally become stronger than fear. "If you believe love is not proven by wealth but by truth, patience, and the courage to repair what was broken, subscribe and stay close for more heartfelt Western stories like this one." That evening, Mercy and Daniel walked the north fence where she had first found him half fallen in the dust. The cedar post still leaned a little, though Daniel had offered twice to replace it. Mercy had refused. Some things deserved to remain as markers. The farmhouse glowed behind them with lamplight. The barn stood firm. The repaired roof held beneath a soft spring rain beginning to fall. Daniel's hand rested warm around hers, no longer begging, no longer hiding, simply there. Mercy looked over Willow Bend, over the land that was still hers, over the man who had finally learned that love could not be tested by a lie and could not be kept without truth. "Daniel," she said softly. He turned. She smiled then, not as a woman forgetting the past, but as one no longer ruled by it. "Come home." Together, they walked back through the rain toward the porch light, leaving behind the old fence, the old fear, and the first broken version of their vows, while morning waited somewhere beyond the dark fields, ready to rise on a love that had finally learned how to stand in the open.